Washington picks up a blue chip offensive lineman.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into a special bonus edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor of UW Huskies Wire. Make sure you go check out all the written work over at uwhuskieswire.usatoday.com. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's just me today. I'm flying solo because I've got a special bonus edition because the Washington Huskies on Monday morning, they landed a commitment from four-star offensive lineman Esun Tafa from Corner Canyon High School in Utah. This is a huge pickup for Washington. I really can't understate that enough. He's ranked number 182 in the country. He's number 10 interior offensive lineman, according to 247 Sports. And that's just the tip of the iceberg with this guy, where when I think about offensive lineman, this is exactly what you want him to look like. He's listed at 6'4", 305 pounds. And the more I watch his frame, the more excited I get about what this guy can bring along the interior, where I look at his frame and I say, if he wants to play tackle, I feel like you could get by with him there, but this guy's going to make his living on the interior. Probably, I would probably say left guard if I were to pigeonhole him into one position right now, where the way I look at him, I think he moves really, really well for his size. And he's somebody who he moves downhill really well. He's got great hands. And just the more I think about it, the more I say, this is a guy who you can pull, get into space, and he's going to be a big time blocker. Where the thing I might most be impressed with, honestly, when I look at his film, is the way he pass blocks, where he's very patient. He's not somebody who I look at him and he tries to kick slide, where he plays left tackle right now for Corner Canyon. But he's somebody, when I look at his just the tape, I see somebody who isn't necessarily being over anxious as a pass blocker. He doesn't try to just move and get really deep into sets right away. He's very patient. He's very willing to see what the defensive end is going to do before he almost tries to throw a counter right away, which I think is pretty interesting, which is one reason he might end up fitting better on the interior. But you look at his frame, and again, 6'4", 305 pounds, according to 247 Sports, he's got a wingspan of close to 80 inches. And this is something where when I look at that, I say, yeah, absolutely, you could succeed on the exterior. But I look at this guard depth that Washington is starting to build up right now, and I say, wow, there's so much to like here, where, it starts right now when we look at it, where Landen Hatchett's playing right guard, Gardner Millar and Enoch Vamaha have been rotating at left for the last couple of months. But you start to look at 2025, and obviously he's a 2026 guy. So this is somebody who we're not going to be talking about for a while in terms of on-field production. But you look at what Washington's building next year. When you look at the 2025 class, obviously we're talking about Peter Lange yesterday on the Sunday show. And then on top of that, there's Jack Schaefer. He's probably going to end up a tackle, but there's Lowen Coleman-Brusa. There's Jake Flores. There's so many guys. You can talk about. Zach Staskowski is a pure tackle, so he's somebody we're not necessarily going to mention in this conversation. But I look at that depth from the 2025 class, and then I combine that with what we already see from Washington in terms of who's in the program right now, where David Boyajian is somebody who he's got tackle size, but they might like him on the interior. They tried him at tackle throughout spring and fall camp. Looks like it might stick, but we'll see. And then we look at some of the other guys. Paki Finau being the number one name that comes to mind. Michael Watkins being another one. Washington has done a really, really good job building a lot of really quality depth along the offensive line. And this is another guy who is going to fit into that very, very well. And I look at what Brennan Carroll has been able to do with offensive linemen for the longest time. And obviously the number one name that comes to mind outside of Jordan Morgan, who's picked in the first round in April by the Green Bay Packers, is Jonas Avaiana, where this is a guy who started off at guard and then he kicked out to tackle. And I don't know if that would necessarily be the plan for Tafa, but it is something that I think is really interesting. He talked to our buddy Scott Eklund over at 247 Sports over the summer. And one thing that he told him was a guy who I really love watching is Troy Fautanu. And that's something where I don't necessarily see that in his game, and that's no disrespect, because Troy is just an all-world athlete. And anybody who's watched Washington or, watched him during the NFL Combine knows what kind of athlete that Troy is. Well, I don't think that necessarily is where Tafa's ceiling is. That's something where I could see him on that sort of trajectory where he starts at guard, moves out to tackle if need be. But this is what Washington has needed to do for the longest time in the Big Ten. It's find a way to just get some of these high caliber prospects along the offensive line in the building, and then you figure it out from there. And this is a great example of that. We got so much more about him after a quick break. Because we've got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And little fun action you might want to check out from Monday Night Football tonight. I love Ladd McConkey. I like the over in catches, the over in yards, anytime touchdown. But Derrick Henry, anytime touchdown, another one you can't necessarily go wrong there. Check out all those odds and more over on FanDuel. So let's jump back in with what Tafa brings on film. I love the footwork. The footwork is great. The way he uses his hands is just really stellar for somebody who's still only a junior in high school. And the way I look at him, I say, this is a guy who, just based on where he is technically right now, if he played early, I wouldn't be surprised. And that's something we know this staff doesn't have an aversion to. I'm not necessarily saying that that would be the best course of action. When I look at this offensive line, I just listed off a whole bunch of guys that right before the break that could make an impact next season, where Lars and I have talked endlessly about this could be a really big jump forward in 2025 if the offensive line gets to where it needs to be. And we're going to see that. We're going to see some new players starting, whether it be, Kahlee Tafai maybe wins a full-time role, Maximus McCree, maybe there's a transfer at left tackle, but then you look at guard Memoir probably coming back. Landen Hatchett sliding over to center. Maybe Paki Finau or one of those other younger guys they really like slots in at right guard. And then we'll see what year 2 of Jurassic Party at right tackle looks like. All of a sudden, that offensive line, it might not necessarily be one of the best in the Big Ten, but it's taking a significant step forward with, Damon Williams behind you, who's somebody who's going to certainly negate just really mitigate the number of sacks taken when, we look at, obviously, Will Rogers has taken 24, the majority of the 24 that the offensive line is allowed this season. But I look at that in 2025, and I say Damon's going to be able to do a whole bunch with his just ability to get out of the pocket and ability to create with his legs. And with a much better offensive line, you want to see more players like this coming in and saying, hey, I really like what Washington has done to develop some of these younger guys. And that's the most important thing that I think we've seen this year, where I look at a guy like Kahlee Tafai. When he came in, it was under Scott Huff, and Scott Huff said, hey, I see the potential in this guy. It was very clearly a long-term projectional take where the frame is elite. You like the way he moves, and you say, if I can get the technicality, just all that stuff down pat, this guy could be a really good player. And that's what he's shown so far. I'm curious to see what a full season that might look like, where whatever position you want to put him at, that's a guy who has shown he can make an impact in the Big Ten, even as a redshirt freshman. So I think about him going forward. That's a guy I really like. And I don't necessarily think that Tafa is going to be on that type of development path, but this is somebody who I point to Kahlee Tafai because I say, if Brennan Carroll and this coaching staff can do that with a lower rated 3-star guy, you kind of wonder, which has always kind of been the thing with this coaching staff. And they've done a good job of selling that at all positions, where it's, hey, we did a really good job developing guys like Jonah Coleman as a 3-star prospect, guys like Jordan Morgan, Jonas Avayanes, some of these guys who are a little bit more under the radar, but we've did a good job working them up and getting them where they're getting talked about as, high level NFL draft prospects. That's what this is all about at the end of the day. And that's something that I feel that Tafa is going to do a really good job of getting to the next level. This is a guy who, if he's a redshirt sophomore and he's an all-conference kind of player, that's the kind of ceiling that I see for him, where he's got the potential, he's got everything you need, and it's just a matter of this coaching staff showing, hey, we've developed all these guys, now let's see what we can do with some of these higher-level prospects. And as Jedd Fisch talks about building and getting to whatever the next wave of Washington is, where we've seen right now, obviously 6-5. It's not the season that we all expected Washington to have, where 8-4 was the reality that Lars and I kind of felt that this team would be at this point in time, but the offensive line has not been there. You look at next year and you say it could be a significant jump forward, and you think about what year 3, year 4, year 5, if you can continue to build these classes and sustain that success might look like, Esun Tafa is a perfect guy to say, hey, this is what that success could look like if you keep landing more prospects in that vein and building through the trenches. And we see what the receiver position looks like in the 2025 class. And you look at some of these other positions that the staff has done a really good job building in 2025. You just can't help but think about what the rest of the 26 class might look like. And you say, well, what if they're able to figure out, a high value defensive tackle, Find a guy who can make an impact there. Find some more impact linebackers, another running back, maybe some tight ends. You look all over the field and you say, the foundation is set. This coaching staff has done a great job of building a foundation. But then you look forward in 2026, the question begs, how high can this staff really take this recruiting class? We'll get there right after message from our good friends over at GameTime, because GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. GameTime Picks filters up the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which is great news for anybody in the Seattle area out there who wants to go check out Husky basketball, which has got a whole bunch of games coming up. Big Ten plays right around the corner. The Seahawks, who had a great win on Sunday over the Arizona Cardinals, or the Kraken. Anybody. There's so many great deals that you can find on GameTime because of GameTime Picks. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. With all-in pricing, you can toggle this feature to show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And with seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime Picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. So let's talk about this 2026 class. I love where it's going. Tafa became the 5th player to commit, where he joins Esun Tafa, who, one thing I got to say before we really get in there, I really love the idea of Tafa on the interior, just plowing, clearing the way for somebody like Esun Tafa, where just a big power back. I love what he brings to the table. I'm so excited about where this class is already, with a couple of local guys in Terrence Sarian and Wasila Lobi, and then obviously the kicker in CJ Wallace. This is a really solid foundation for this 2026 class. And it just begs the question, how high can Washington take this? Can it be what Jedd Fisch wanted in year one? And obviously, barring a few last-minute surprises, he's not going to get to, which is the highest-ranked class in UW history. For that to happen, he needs to get it inside the top 15. And personally, I think that it's within reach, where there are a couple of guys that I'm really curious about. There's one who took an unofficial visit, feels like a long shot right now, but that's Kean Pepe, the offensive tackle from IMG Academy, where Washington is clearly trying to make some inroads at IMG. Getting Raiden Vinesbright is awesome. That's a really nice take. Let's see what happens with Donovan Olubade over the next couple of weeks. Let's see if he signs early, what that might look like. But Pepe is a guy who just a massive frame, top 20 right now overall in terms of 247's rankings. That's a guy who I love. I'm really curious to see if that's the kind of guy who, you know, he's from the West Coast originally, maybe wants to come play closer to home. Feels like that's a selling point for Washington. They've done a really good job of getting him to come up on an unofficial, and let's see what that looks like going forward. But it all starts in the trenches, but we really need to talk about defensive tackle. And one guy who I'm really, really curious about is another Utah guy. That's Bott Mulitalo, where he's come up. He's taken an unofficial visit. I believe he was here for the Michigan game, but that's another guy who he's top 50 overall right now. When I watch his film, I see Voitanufi just in a much bigger body, where he's listed at, I believe, 6'4", 275 right now. And that's a guy who he plays edge, but he could move to the interior. And he's somebody who just, I like to call him a disruptor, where no matter where you line him up, he's somebody who's going to find a way to get to the quarterback. And those are the kind of guys that Washington needs to close on, where they're doing a really good job. They've established these relationships. They said, hey, we really like you. And this coaching staff, if you talk to any recruit, which Lars and I have over the course of this channel, you go check out our interviews with guys like Dash Beerley, with Devin Hyde. There are a whole bunch of guys that have said this coaching staff is awesome. We love them. We love what they've been able to do to develop a relationship with us. They're really cool guys. We love talking to them. That's all great. But now it's a matter of closing, because we've seen what the floor, honestly, because that's what this should be considered in terms of the 2025 class. Ranked 18th right now, that should be considered the floor, because Jedd Fisch has come in and said, I want the highest ranked class in UW history. I want this. I want that. That's great. He set the bar really, really high, which is where it should be for Washington. This is a top 10 to 15 program in the country every year when things are going right. So that's great. That's what you love to see. But I'm aiming higher. Bott is one guy who I've really got my eye on. But then there are a couple other guys that I think really need to be mentioned, where think about Peter Lange's commitment on Sunday. One guy that he's talked about trying to recruit to come with him is Tommy Tofi. That's a top 100 guy. He's ranked as an interior right now on 247 Sports, where he also plays at Archbishop Reardon in Northern California. If you can find a way to get Tommy Tofi to join Esun Tafa, that's a fantastic interior class. That's like, you might need a true center in there at some point with Landen Hatchett. He'd be going into his senior year in 2026, but that's a really, really solid offensive line class. But then you look at some of the other positions that you really want to make sure are locked up. I look at the defensive backfield. And this is the nice thing where we've seen that Washington has developed these relationships with a lot of top tier guys. And number one, we've talked about him on this channel. That's Bralan Womack. That's a safety from Mississippi. He's rated as a 5-star prospect right now. I spoke with his mother a couple weeks ago after they came up for an unofficial visit for the USC game. And she told me we were blown away by everything Washington has to offer. We set up an official visit that day on the spot because we loved everything that Vinny Sunseri and this whole coaching staff is doing. And we've seen how versatile safeties can be. And if you can find a way, in this Belichick defense, and if you can find a way to get Bralan Womack out of Mississippi as a 5-star prospect to come to the West Coast, all of a sudden you're looking at a top 15 class right there. That's a massive get. But if you compare him with a guy like RJ Sermons, who is a top 50 player down at Rancho Cucamonga in Southern California, plays corner, this class really does have the potential to be what Jedd Fisch thought 2025 would be, and be the best class in UW history. There are those building blocks there. I'm not trying to set expectations too high. This is where Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff are trying to set them by saying, we are going to widen our footprint. We're going to go all over the country, and we're going to find a way to make inroads in Florida, in Texas, in Illinois, wherever you want to say. They are trying. And that is just that's half the game of recruiting. Obviously, closing and selling are huge and very important. But the fact that they're even making the effort to go out there and say, hey, look at what we've got going on at Washington. This is really huge. That goes a long way with some of these kids. And if you find a way to get them to Seattle, they've shown they can close on some of their top targets. But you just got to keep an eye out for all these guys. And the best way to do that is check out our Locked On Huskies Insider program. We do some Q&As where it's like this, a little bit more informal, one-on-one sort of stuff. We answer your questions. All the recruiting stuff goes right to your text message inbox. It's super fun. You can check it out down in the description below. You get a free 2-week trial. After that, it's $4.99 a month for all the rumors, everything you might need to answer any questions. And if you also just like hearing everything we have to offer, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. And we're updating the channel for new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.